This is Washington Times Front Page for Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Gerbo. The Pentagon's plan to take financial stakes in private companies could inflict long-term unintended consequences on the U.S. defense industry. That's according to North Carolina Representative Pat Harrigan. The Republican and former Army Special Forces officer told our Ben Wolfgang on the Threat Status podcast that, "I'm not comfortable with it at all, and I haven't been comfortable with it since it began." He fears it will create anti-competitiveness in the defense industry. So far, the Pentagon has taken or intends to take direct equity stakes in at least 4 companies, one that will produce solid rocket motors for munitions, and 3 others in companies that mine and process rare earth elements and other critical minerals. The Trump administration as a whole has taken direct equity stakes in more than 20 companies, many of which came from the Commerce Department or other federal agencies, according to a tally from the Cato Institute think tank. The state of Florida is scheduled to execute 2 prisoners on the same day in a nearly unprecedented move as it tries to clear a backlog of death row inmates. Susan Ferricchio reports 68-year-old James Duckett and 80-year-old Dominic Occhione are to be executed separately on Tuesday, the first time that's happened in the state since 1964. Both men were convicted of crimes that occurred in the 1980s. For the second year in a row, Florida leads the nation in carrying out death sentences of condemned prisoners, with 12 so far. Last year, 19 inmates were executed in the state. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says North Korea is preparing to deploy 30,000 more troops to support Russia's war against his country. Andrew Salmon reports Zelensky said Russia is preparing another round of mobilizations to replace soldiers who have been lost in the war. He said Russia has enlisted 221,000 soldiers this year and sustained more than 225,000 losses overall. Zelensky also said North Korea is preparing to transport additional ballistic missile launchers to Russia. Democrats say if they win control of the House in the midterm elections, a list of demands would serve as a blueprint for the changes they would want to make to U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. George Caldwell reports a top goal is to limit the number of ICE arrests. Other desired changes include banning immigration officers from wearing masks and requiring them to display identifying information and body cameras so they can be tracked and monitored. The Department of Homeland Security responded to those demands by saying nearly 70% of ICE arrests are migrants who either have criminal convictions or pending charges. And finally, Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman Rand Paul has released Dr. Anthony Fauci's diary ahead of Fauci's testimony before the panel. Stephen Dinan reports the 1,100-page diary details Fauci's thinking as COVID-19 emerged in China and spread to the United States. Fauci described in his writings his allegiance to the idea that the virus leaped from animals to humans and his rejection of an alternative hypothesis that it originated in a Chinese lab. Fauci was director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases when the pandemic emerged. For many Americans, he became the face of the virus and the effort to combat it. Find all today's front page stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page or on the Washington Times app, and find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on social media at Wash Times for breaking news, sports, commentary, and more. For the Washington Times, I'm George Gerbo.